years, his work is focused on the purposes and impacts of U.S. nuclear and other strategic weapons programs, including their effect on global disarmament efforts, and on the relationship between nuclear technology, militarism, and the global economy. He's a member of the board of the International Association of Lawyers Against Nuclear Arms, supporting the United for Peace and Justice, and the Global Council of Abolition.
Thanks. Well, that quote that Jackie read from is actually from a little leaflet we put together on the relationship between nuclear weapons and climate change. And it was paired up with another quote, which was one from Louis Humphrey in 1970. Is the association of inordinate power and productivity with equally inordinate violence and destruction a purely accidental? And I think the speakers in our first panel eloquently provided us the answer to that question. And I would also note that in 1970, Mumford was writing from within the context of deep, sustained, and diverse social movements, the kind of moment that Vincent was describing, and I'll come back to that theme later today. So, a number of us who are here now had an interesting discussion in Vienna at the NPT preparatory committee meetings about obstacles and opportunities for disarmament. And I'm going to try to continue that theme a little bit there in the context of how we might forge connections with other emerging movements, and also at the same time to provide some background to this afternoon's last panel, which will look at what comes next after the ban treaty has been negotiated. And my thoughts, of course, are very strongly influenced by my experience here in the United States, but conditions in the United States also, unfortunately, still play a disproportionate role due to its place at the apex of the global economy and the global war system. Now, the ban treaty effort, together with the conferences on humanitarian impacts that precede it, constitutes an important affirmation of the norms against nuclear weapons possession and use. These initiatives raised awareness in a new generation of activists of the catastrophic effects of nuclear warfare. If the ban treaty is successfully negotiated, which appears likely, it will provide new ways for nuclear weapons-free governments to exert pressure on the nuclear-armed states. And it also could provide new opportunities for raising public awareness about the dangers that nuclear weapons pose. But so far, the humanitarian conferences on the effects of nuclear weapons and the ban treaty process have not sparked mass movements for disarmament in the nuclear-armed states or their leading allies. And the main obstacles for disarmament, as Sharon noted, are unsurprisingly the intransigence of those nuclear-armed states, sustained by the inertia of their entangled antagonisms and the economic and political power of their military-industrial complexes. And it's important to keep in mind that the convention banning nuclear weapons will bind only the countries that join it. And so far, these nuclear-armed states and our allies have stood strongly in opposition. But almost half the world's population lives in nuclear-armed countries. These countries account for over half of the world's gross domestic product. And the 6 leading countries that have military alliances with the nuclear-armed United States, Germany, Italy, Canada, Australia, Japan, South Korea, and you have over half the world's population, accounting for 70% of global GDP. And in an era of renewed and more multipolar and complex great power competitions, the leading militaries now play a variety of roles for their nuclear weapons. The nuclear-armed military-industrial complexes, having survived their own post-Cold War ideological crisis, have helped to sustain a highly inequitable global circulation of trade and investment and constitute a significant source of profit and a center of economic and political power within it. So again, if the convention is negotiated, which it most likely will be, it can provide us a new tool to work for nuclear weapons abolition. But it can be no stronger than the hands that wield it. And for there to be substantial progress toward nuclear abolition, we will need mass movements in the nuclear-armed countries. Large-scale opposition here in the United States is likely to come about only as a part of a broader peace movement, one that, as many people have commented today, can work together with other emerging movements by focusing on the common causes of the dangers and injustices they seek to end. A renewed effort to understand and explain the dynamics driving the growing risk of war among nuclear-armed countries in this movement is an essential starting point. It's the path to starting to make the connections to other issues, from wealth and income inequality to the damage wrought to the environment by an economy dependent on endless competition and endless material growth. Now, amidst a generally grim political landscape, there are some glimpses now of how things might be able to move in this direction. We seem to be coming out of a period of about 3 decades of low social mobilization. This period has been characterized by also what Vincent was talking about: single-issue, professionalized, single-interest group advocacy style politics. Times of low social mobilization lead to a kind of self-reinforcing stagnation. Low rates of political involvement tend towards the proliferation of these single-issue organizations, employing professionals who use conventional campaigning techniques and litigation. Conventional professionals focus on effects rather than causes, offering incremental technical, legal, and short-term political fixes for the problems that the dominant order of things systematically generates. Proposing any policy change that would significantly affect the current distribution of wealth and power lies beyond the ambit of the reasonable and defendable professional course of activity. And in times of low social mobilization, proposals that would require fundamental social change do appear unreasonable, as only deep, broad, sustained social movements can change the boundaries of what is politically possible. And, in this respect, the ban treaty is interesting to think about, because it may be close to the outer limits of what you can do in disarmament work in a time of low social mobilization. It developed an international network of NGOs employing skilled and dedicated campaigners with the support of some friendly governments. It helped to spark a series of high-profile international conferences on the consequences of nuclear warfare. But notably, these conferences focused mainly on the effect of nuclear weapons and not on the causes of continued high-tech militarism and renewed confrontations among nuclear armed powers. Give me a moment, I'm fighting with the bike here, so it's keeping my voice going is a bit strong. Now, this kind of approach was sufficient to gain the backings of governments in nuclear weapons-free countries. But without a far broader basis for social support, it's extremely difficult to make real disarmament progress in countries where nuclear weapons play a systemic role in military policies, national security ideologies, and increasingly insular, top-tier national economies. Now, in retrospect, we can see that the ban treaty initiative started in a very different moment. The episodic waves of resistance sparked by the global crisis of 2007 to 2008 and the distinctly inhumane response of most of the Western governments mostly still lay in the future. So too did the accelerated tensions among